Protesters in Memphis say disbanding the specialized crime unit linked to the beating death of Tyre Nichols is a good start, but they want to see more changes to the city's police department.
The Scorpion unit has been deactivated permanently.
Amen. Everybody clap yourselves on the back. Pat yourselves on the back. Amen.
This was the moment this weekend where demonstrators in Memphis heard the news that the Scorpion unit was scrapped. All 5 of the former officers involved in Nichols' beating belonged to that unit. Now, some residents are now calling for the city to abolish the entire organized crime unit, and some want an overhaul to the entire police department. So in addition to experiencing higher rates of police violence, African Americans are also dealing with a secondary trauma, being exposed to the trauma of others and visions of people being brutalized. So to discuss this, we are joined now by Darron Smith. He's a sociology professor specializing in race-based trauma at the University of Memphis, and he joins us now live. Professor, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here, Natasha.
Professor, we wanted to have this conversation because over the past 2-3 days, we've spoken to a number of individuals in Memphis, all of them of African American descent, and all of them saying they don't want to watch the video, that they are physically and psychologically not ready to see it themselves. And subsequently, we've learned of something that's an area of your specialty, which is linked fate. Can you describe for us what that is?
So, linked fate speaks to the notion of trauma, or what we know as racial trauma. The idea that when people are abused and dehumanized in violent ways, that's broadcast for large audiences to see, it has the potential to cause what's called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So whenever the police are involved in in fact, there's been a wonderful study that was done by Williams, who looked at this idea that when a police-involved incident occurs, in this respect, it was police-involved shootings. When they occur, the entire Black community where this event occurred is exposed to PTSD. The entire state of Tennessee, Black people who live in Tennessee as a result of Tyre Nichols' death, are experiencing or have experienced trauma or trauma-induced symptoms of PTSD. So this is why it's so critically important for African Americans and other people of color to have a way or an outlet to be able to release and vent some of these frustrations that occur in society today.
I want to get to that outlet in a moment, sir, but I just want to be sure that I and the audience understand. So if you have multiple people in Memphis watching the same video of this 29-year-old man being beat by the police, the African American contingency would just feel that differently than perhaps the white Americans would?
That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay.
That is the definition of linked fate and the definition of racial trauma. That witnessing and seeing these events play out can be very triggering for African Americans. Now, not all African Americans, of course, but those who are most at risk for trauma-related illnesses, such as PTSD.
And what causes that? Is that just a matter of history or personal experience? Here in Canada, we often refer to something called generational trauma when we talk about the experiences of our First Nations or Indigenous, or as you folks would say, Native American communities, how they feel it. So we talk about a generational trauma.
That's right. That's right. And so this would be the same thing, Natasha. This was an extension of what discussions you've had before. Generational trauma is the traumas that have been handed down from previous generations, i.e. slavery, or i.e. indigenous land theft. These processes and systems that have been laid down historically continue in generations of ancestors and their forebears that preceded them. So this is why it's important that we have outlets to be able to express ourselves in these ways. So in witnessing the death of Tyre Nichols, certainly not for every African American was a triggering event, but certainly seeing it happen more frequently than we would like to see not happen. Right? African Americans are just unfortunately persistently exposed to these kinds events that occur in the United States on any given day, on any given year.
And so this experience of a trauma, this linked fate, how does it manifest itself physically, psychologically, in terms of health?
Well, the symptoms of PTSD or linked fate-related disorders, race-based disorders, include symptoms such as headache, diaphoretic, people are sweating, feelings of impending doom, feeling like something's bad is about to happen, difficulties relating to other people, difficulties in processing one's emotions. There's also more serious symptoms such as flashbacks and nightmares that individuals may have of replaying the incident over and over in their minds. Then, of course, suicidality could also be a result of this disorder, or a result of people being exposed to these sorts of things. So there's a number of somatic symptoms that manifest when individuals are exposed to traumatic events, such as what I've indicated before. This idea of being a Black man and walking around in society, always having to look over my shoulder, right? It's daunting. It's daunting. Because as every African-American man, when we see these events occur, we always think in the back of our mind, that could be me, or that could be someone who's close to me, or someone that I love, or my nephew, or whomever. So I think these things always loom large in the minds of African-Americans when we see these terrible events that occur here in the United States.
So, Professor, with all of that in mind, but also in the context of we all have to report the news, so we got to show some of this. Clearly, the folks, the officials in Memphis felt we need to release this video. People want to see it. People are asking for it. There's a degree of scrutiny involved in this. There's a degree of transparency that needs to happen, particularly considering how brutal the beating was of Tyre Nichols. So the video has to be released, but then what is the onus on the community or the society to make sure there's protection in place or mental health support in place for those who would be feeling a subsequent trauma?
Unfortunately, there's no systemic community-based interventions for helping people to process these sorts of traumatic events that they witness. I mean, much of it is dependent upon who has insurance, who has access to healthcare, mental health services, and who doesn't. So this event brings us to a further divide when we talk about racial and ethnic disparities or health equity, for instance. And so people of color who may be exposed to the Tyre Nichols beating may not have many places to go to get care. As you know, there's a major shortage of healthcare providers, mental health care providers in the United States, but I imagine Canada is also experiencing a disproportionate low number of folks who want to be in these professions. And so I think you have a lot of this sort of circulating off the back of a pandemic. So I think this event that occurred with Tyre Nichols is part of a larger discussion of inequalities that exist in the United States since 1619, since the first African set foot in Jamestown, Virginia, to where we are today in 2023.
You know, sir, talking to you, so much is sparking in my brain because so many of our colleagues and friends here in Canada have been watching what's taking place in Iran very closely, right? And those who are of Iranian or Persian descent are watching the videos of people being beaten in the cities of Iran, and they're so frustrated, why don't mainstream or non-Iranian Canadians or anyone else not care as much? But it seems like that would also fall into this linked fate sort of feeling. We see ourselves in those images and others don't. But you know what? We'll save that for another day. Before I let you go, sir, Professor, I understand that you did choose to watch the video that was released by the Memphis police of the beating of Tyre Nichols. I wonder if you can describe for us the impact that had on you.
Yes, I was able to watch the video when it was released on Friday after 6 p.m. And it was just what I saw, what feelings welled up in me was anger, a great deal of sadness, a great deal of frustration, and a sense that when people look at this video, they're going to see 5 black men beat up on another black man, right? And they're going to completely ignore the fact that these are all black people, so we don't have to worry much about race. Not recognizing that the event itself, right, is a part of a larger system of police brutality whether or not the offender is black, white, or whatever the particular shade of gray that they may be, that this is a systemic issue that's been afoot since the 16th century, or the 18th century, pardon me. So this has been going on for a long time. And so in order to change the way that we police in America, we have to really, really look at ourselves, take a hard look at ourselves, look at our gun culture, for instance, right? Look at our disrepair communities that significantly have lost all of their talented individuals into suburban communities, right? All of these different layers of social problems that exist, which create conditions like what we saw last night. Police need better training. Police need to have better training at conflict resolution, right? And not resort to their firearm or their pepper spray or whatever it is they use to subdue someone. How about diplomacy? And I'll add one last thing. If I have enough time, Natasha, I'll say this. I actually went to the police chief here in Memphis, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, to talk to them about the very issues that we're seeing play out right now. I was talking to them about perhaps having some interventions when police have incidents such as what we see with Tyre Nichols, a way to process it. And so what I was told is two things. Police officers they have a choice. They can choose to do nothing, go see no one, or they can choose to go see the contracted psychologist that they have on staff there, who's absolutely overwhelmed. Most men on the police force would rather not go and talk about these issues. They'd rather hold them in and let them fester until they overflow, which may have been, I'm not saying this is the case, which may have been what happened with these 5 black men on Friday who were frustrated or whatever their issues were. And this gentleman just happened to be the wrong time, the wrong place. So I'll just leave it at that.
Sir, you got to come back and we have to talk some more. Professor Darron Smith, thank you so much for your time and for your insights, sir.
Thank you, Natasha. Appreciate you. Bless you.